So we will start. So we are going to start. Thank you, Sukanya. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this Biodiversity Confab. This is an effort to explain and create awareness about complex issues related to biodiversity. Today we are discussing food biodiversity and the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. Member countries of this treaty are meeting next week in Peru, and on the agenda is the enhancement of functioning of the multilateral system of access and benefit sharing. So I know that this sounds like a string of words. So we are very happy to have with us Nithin Ramakrishnan, who will unpack what all this enhancement is all about. And more importantly, he will explain why the decision taken at this meeting on these issues are important for the global south and especially for India. He is a senior researcher at the Third World Network and he is right now in Peru to attend the governing body meeting. My colleague Shimali will be managing the chat and we will share some of the reports that we have worked on which are related to the subject. So let's begin. Welcome to the Biodiversity Confab, Nithin. So we can just jump in right in. So, what is all this treaty about and why is it important?
Uh, Thank you, Vibha, and thank you, Down to Earth, as well as CSC for this opportunity for me to talk and also kind of unpack some of the issues associated with the plant treaty, or otherwise called as International Treaty for Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. Um, so the treaty is generally is signed to or developed to actually promote agrobiodiversity, genetic diversity of the food and feed crops which we cultivate, uh, and conserve it, sustainably use it, as well as enable a system which would actually share these resources, these diverse resources across countries, and develop or gain benefits out of it for the public. So the system here is actually very important in terms of looking at creating incentives for people to conserve uh, biodiversity, or especially agrobiodiversity, as well as uh, spread the information, spread the awareness of why these genetic resources are important, and how it helps promote food security. So the multilateral system, which we are talking about, or which is the main center of attraction today, is one part of, or one component of this treaty, which deals with sharing of genetic resources for food and agriculture, plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, which means essentially you can summarize as seeds or regenerative plant parts or planting parts, etc. You share this for research and development. People like breeders can actually kind of use it for breeding and develop new varieties. Also, several other kinds of research can be undertaken within the scope of food and feed use. So once these resources are accessed and developed, then the outcomes or outputs could also be shared back in a fair and equitable manner to the providers. So if we look at the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is another international treaty, It is the basic, I would argue it is the parent law of access and benefit sharing, or the general law of access and benefit sharing, where you provide access to genetic resources. It can be plant, animal, or microbes, etc., and then benefit sharing. It actually says the default system is countries having sovereign rights over their natural resources will determine through their national legislations appropriate conditions or mechanisms for people outside their country to access these resources. And in that mechanism or in that process or procedure, you will also determine certain conditions for fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of those resources. So it can be monetary benefits, like if someone produces a commercial product and sells it in the market, you get a share of the profit. It can be non-monetary benefits, like someone develops a medicine, which is very important, a life-saving medicine for many of us or our people, then we get certain doses of those medicines to our vulnerable people to have free access to those medicines. Or like, so these kind of various things that maybe new technology is developed, you get transfer of that technology. These ways, several types of non-monetary benefits are also accompanying. When it comes to plant treaty, what is being done is to instead of allowing every country to determine terms and conditions and ask for benefits separately, it is managed centrally at the FAO level. They have developed something called as a standard material transfer agreement, and you basically through the standard material transfer agreement share genetic resources, plant genetic resources for food and agriculture seeds, and in return, some benefits will be shared. So what is it? What are those plant genetic resources for food and agriculture shared through the system? It is actually 64 crops. So any seeds of these 64 crops or any varieties of these 64 crops can be shared. Uh, the 64 crops are selected on the basis of food security, importance for food security, as well as interdependence between countries to maintain access to genetic resources, which means, like, for example, a product might be originating in, let's say, in Peru. But this product, I mean, it's not a product. I mean, saying a plant, a crop might be like potato or something is very famous in Peru. It might be originating. Uh, I'm not sure about the country of origin, but still, assuming that the country, there might be a center of origin for some of these crops, like in one place. This crop might be cultivated in another country which considers it as a staple food. And sometimes there will be several varieties of the same crop in some other country. So there are at least three countries I'm talking about, right? One country which is the center of origin, and another country which is the place of diversity, and another country which is the country which uses it as a staple food or mostly in part of the staple food. So it is important that all of them have access to all these resources, all these diversity, so that, like, if climatic conditions changes or some pest attack occurs, etc., you have enough resources to improvise your seeds, improvise your genetic materials, and then continue with your cultivation. So this is why these 64 crops are selected on basis of, like, the level of this interdependency as well as importance for food security. Now, once you are shared, what do you get it back in the SMDA? So if someone is receiving these materials through the standard material transfer agreement of the FAO, what is it that they are obliged to give back? They are obliged to give you back especially information generating out of the research results. So if I get a seed from India or from Peru and do a research on that, the information is developed and a research outcome is there. That research outcome has to be uploaded back into a global information system maintained by the treaty, whereby everyone can have more information about what is so peculiar about those seed and what all things can come out of that seed, etc. That's first one. Another important benefit which the recipient is obliged to give you is monetary benefits. When they commercialize a new seed variety, like if I take a material from Peru and develop a particular, or not any other country, not just Peru, and develop a new seed variety and sell it in the market for the purpose of cultivation, then I'm getting profit, and out of that profit I am supposed to put a percentage of money into the benefit sharing fund,
Mhm.
especially if I am not allowing others to do further breeding and further research on the improved seed. So if I'm keeping that seed with me, kind of monopolizing and selling it into the commercial market without uh, uh, without
Share.
allowing the further
Okay.
research
Yeah.
and breeding, then I have put money into it.
Okay.
So
So
this is the second monetary benefit sharing. I think these are the major obligations, and then there are some other benefits which come to the countries together through the functioning of the entire treaty. Like
mhm.
there are other entities in the treaty, like international gene banks, who have come to an agreement with the treaty, etc. So they will kind of give some form of capacity building, some additional technology transfer, etc. Some kind of other benefits which are not necessarily an obligatory mandatory one which flows back to you, but generally, as a part of implementation of the treaty, you might be achieving.
Okay. So I suppose the good example of this would be potato, which is originated in Peru, and we are consuming a lot of it. And Europe actually suffered with the disease uh, of potato long back. So I suppose potato would be a good example of how things are moving around and where the benefits are. So, but actually, how is the system working? Like, it's a good treaty and everything, but is the system working?
So I think the system has got several problems, to be frank. Even though it's a multilateral system, I feel it has several problems, especially because the people who have, kind of working with it, uh, is of a philosophy that access to the PGRFA, access to these plant genetic resources itself is a major benefit, which is also written in the treaty. Article 13 of the treaty very clearly says ensuring access to these genetic resources itself is a major benefit. But then the treaty also says once you provide access, it is also important, equally important. Even in fact, it should mutually reinforce that the
Mhm,
outcomes coming out of the research and development should also be shared fairly and equitably. What is happening is that that second part is not happening.
mhm,
More than 7 million seats or accessions have been shared under the treaty so far to around 25 to 28,000 users. And if you take the numbers of people who have provided uh, any sort of monetary contribution to the fund, is only six. It's 6 out of 28,000 users is a very large. It shows the real situation of that benefit sharing, right? And also the other benefit, which is the information sharing. Global information system. If you go into the global information system, or even the reporting, like for example, I was going through the reports which has submitted to this session that's starting next week, there is no report over the implementation of that obligation, that how many of these 28,000 users have actually reported back the information of their research results, etc. Right? So, in a way, the functioning of the treaty is currently really problematic. I would argue the benefit sharing side is really a failure.
mhm,
Access is good because it is improving access, like around 7 million, and there are a lot of around 1 lakh SMTAs have been signed. But on the other hand, there is also a big problem in the access side. Because if we look at Convention on Biological Diversity as well as the treaty, when it came together, the treaty, I mean, both these, especially the Convention on Biological Diversity, came in the context of decolonization, and they wanted to clearly give out the message that these genetic resources belongs to the states and their communities,
mhm,
and whoever is accessing it should be accessing in an appropriate manner, respectful of all the rights associated with these resources.
mhm,
So, which means, like, if I am taking it from even taking it from an indigenous community in India, I have to get prior informed consent of that particular community and enter into an agreement with that community to share benefits. I mean, or understanding to share benefits. So that's how we understand it as called as appropriate access. Uh,
Mhm.
Now, what's happening in the treaty is that, like, let's say India announces, okay, out of the 64 crops, let's say India has 10 or 15 crops in its national gene bank or in its control. India says, okay, we are willing to share these resources. What happens is immediately an international gene bank comes and ask the India government or the authority to share it with them. We share it with them under an SMTA. Everything is clear because they come, they talk to our authority, information is shared, agreement is signed. So there is consent as well as agreement. It moves to the International Gene Bank. Then most of the foreign researchers and the seed companies, etc., access it from there. And when they
Mhm.
access it from there, no information is shared back with the national authority or the farming community. So it's a complete darkness about who is accessing your seeds from these international gene banks and what they are producing out of it. So to give a number, I mean, it's a very striking number which I remember from 2023 report. Uh, it's a For Africa, the entire African national authorities have signed only 83 SMTAs.
Mhm.
Whereas international gene banks sharing African seeds have signed more than 16,000 SMTAs.
Mhm.
Same thing with Asia, same thing with GRULAC or Latin America region, etc.
Mhm. So that is something what is happening in the case of DSI also. But we will have to explain DSI to actually get into this subject. So if you could explain DSI briefly and then show how the benefits are in that case are not being shared. And
Okay.
actually, it is very important because CBD has agreed to make a multilateral fund for that also, which is similar to the plant treaty uh, system.
Um, so the DSI is another big issue, and which it itself requires an unpacking session. But to put it into a simple, short, brief comment,
Mhm.
so DSI can be generated by anybody, right? Like can be generated by anyone who has capacity to use a sequencing technology, like the people in India or authorities in India or researchers in India can do it. When you share it, when you share materials, the people receiving those materials can also generate it.
Mhm.
So ideally, what should happen in the case of digital sequence information, in accordance with the understanding of digital justice, or what we call as equity in digital economy,
Mhm.
what you should be perhaps doing is to have a national database where these sequences generated, like the genetic, it's basically an order of nucleotides of your DNA particles, of RNA particles, or even for protein sequences, etc., is there, but not getting details into it, to store it nationally and provide access to researchers on the similar kind of set of conditions, like for
Mhm.
benefit sharing, informed consent, or informing back regarding what are the research outcomes, etc. This is the ideal way of sharing it, but unfortunately, I would say for the last 20 years there was this gap of availability to sequencing technologies.
Mhm.
Many countries have started to have hands-on experience with sequencing technologies due to COVID, because when COVID came, people wanted immediate sequencing of the COVID virus and to build vaccines, etc. That's the time when it started spreading to many developing countries, or having access in spread within developing countries itself. So until these last few years, the databases were managed, or now also is managed by the global north, some of their
Mhm.
governments, and it is under their whims and fancy. If they, like, for example, they just ensure they give access anonymously, so anybody can go there, download it without providing username registration, no data access agreement, so they don't take any obligation to share benefits. This is sheer biopiracy in a
Mhm.
digital format.
Mhm.
So the proposal in the CBD, etc., is to actually kind of look forward to develop a system of accountable databases, whereby nationally, or if the multilateral system which you talked about at the CBD, it's an optional system, it is not a mandatory system. Both can be utilized to share benefits. Now, when it comes to the treaty, it's a very interesting debate, Because in the treaty, you should keep in mind that you are obligated to share resources.
Mm-hmm.
In the CBD context, you have no obligation to share resource. It's you have the sovereign rights. When you share it, it's shared. That's it. Where here you have obligation to share resource, so you are sharing it. But in your agreement, in the standard material transfer agreement, you are not telling what the recipient should do with the sequences if they generate it from the shared material, which is a very
Mm-hmm.
important aspect. Like even if you look at any model agreements prepared by even Swiss Academy of Sciences or European entities, or even go to European regulation, etc., it's very clear that every country has a right when they share a material to put in that agreement very clearly what should happen with the sequences.
Okay.
So in the SMTA of this treaty, there is nothing about that aspect at all. So uh, people are, some people do not share it; they keep it with themselves. Some people, like public institutions like the CGIR centers, etc., they share it into the databases, which share it anonymously.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it, this is a very critical problem, because at least in the seed sector, you still need to have an requirement to access the physical material. So you come and access the material even if you have some form of access to DNA, synthetic DNA, etc. You still come back to the system. But once the sequence is available, a food company developing a food flavor
Mm-hmm.
or a food ingredient or a processed food may not necessarily access any more physical material, and
Okay.
they get it anonymously. Even medical companies, actually the treaty very clearly says you should not be using these resources for medical purposes. If you are
Mm-hmm.
using it for medical purposes, you should actually go to the national authority and share bilaterally the benefits, which is very clear in the treaty. But the sequences are available out there, and then benefits are getting undermined both at the FAO level, at the national level as well.
Mhm. So we had actually the first biodiversity confab was on DSI, and I will request Shimali to share the link of that video chat that we had. So that would explain some of these issues much more clearly and in detail. So we did divert a little, but let's get back to the subject of what is happening at the GB governing body meeting 11th, and why it is important. What are the different things that are being which are on the agenda?
So every element of the treaty is in the agenda, including farmers' rights, conservation of plant genetic resources, sustainable use, multilateral system, its functioning, its enhancement, and compliance procedures. All these elements are being discussed. But the center of next week's meeting, clearly, if you see the agenda and all, you could see is a process called enhancement of multilateral system.
Mhm.
That's because, as we just now saw, that the system is not working at the benefit sharing side. So people wanted to improve the benefit sharing aspect of it. And they constituted a working group. And this working group was in functioning for now 10 years or so. It's in 2019 it was blocked, I think, by a single country. I might be wrong, because I don't want to think it was, I was not participant at that kind of time, but people have been sharing, like I think Canada, or one of those countries, or even many countries actually blocked the further discussions, etc. Or because there was somewhere when they reached some consensus in 2019 and were not able to adopt the decision, etc., and then it was paused. Then in 2022, at the initiative of India and Switzerland, uh, they tried to push further negotiations on this, and the working group resumed when the GB took place in Delhi. And after that, I think around 5 meetings the working group has met, and now they have developed a package of measures and they have submitted this for the consideration of the GB. In fact, in the working group, there was no consensus on the package of measures. Around 200 brackets, which means there are around 200 phrases or parts of sentences or provisions, etc., being challenged. I mean, not having consensus in the package. But the kind of so when these kind of divergences exist, the general trend in these days in the negotiations is to international negotiation is to question the efficiency of the forum, and
Mhm.
then come out with a president's text or a chair's text, which is developed by just the bureau or someone, and then take it or leave it. So you'll say like your 10 years you have negotiated, you have not reached consensus. Now what is it? Just take it or leave it. Like that kind of a approach can happen, and which is really, really going to be a worrisome for countries like India and developing countries, especially because the most binding proposal in the package is a proposal to expand the list of crops which is in the Annex 1 of the treaty from 64 to all plant genetic resources. So if you look at currently the Annex 1, it says list of food crops, food and forages. Now it is not anymore food and forage crops, it's all PGRFA. I mean the proposal is like that, which is really concerning because this would mean any plant genetic resources, even a non-edible plant, a wild plant, uh, which is potentially useful for improving a food crop through some research or some, gene editing or whatever you call it, or gene modification. I don't know, whatever R&D processes is. It could be considered as PGRFA and then becomes a part of the system. So it will really threaten the entire national ABS laws applicable on plant genetic resources because you are sharing it through a standard system. And that standard system, as just explained, is completely non-transparent and unaccountable, and there is no proposals to improvise anything on that side. To improvise the governance of the system, there is zero proposals. I wouldn't say limited proposals or inefficient proposals. There is no proposals. I could say no proposal to improve transparency, no proposal to improve governance, no proposals to improve accountability. So this is the status. I mean, there are so many things to be discussed about it, but I'll stop here.
The Annex 1 enhancement is the most crucial aspect of it. I could give an example to this. For example, in the last few years, we have been talking about millets and how they are climate resilient. So, lots of researchers want to work on these millets to figure out how this resilience can be transferred to other crops and everything. However, if I just check the list, it has the major millets like sorghum, it has the barley and everything, but not the minor millets that India has. For example, there's nothing on the little millet or the barnyard millet, nothing on that. So, if we are opening up the annex, it's going to make all this genetic resources available to everywhere, and we may, as you said, we will not be. It's not likely that we will benefit from sharing all this. So that's obviously a cause of concern for our resources and our farmers who have been protecting this for such a long time. So I will get back to the next question. So is this discussion is very important for the global south, as we can see, because we hold all the biodiversity. What why exactly is this important, and what do different groups, political groups and blocs, what are they asking for, and why are they asking for this?
So, for us, it is like a kind of when civil society, when we observe the negotiations, we feel it is like, being a real comeback of the colonial attitude of the developed countries, right? Because they know the system is not functioning. And then there is no good proposals to improve the aspects of the system which is not functioning, and then they're expanding on the things which is already functioning. The logic itself is showing a very wrong political message, right? That developing countries can be twisted and muscled across. I mean, can be flexible or can be exploited like anything. So I feel that the approach towards the package of measures itself is a very, very politically wrong. At least even if somebody actually has a lot of scientific or a logic basis for expanding this annex from 64 crops to say in number of crops, they should actually ideally wait to show a demonstrable multilateral system which is governed properly and then propose it, which makes a more internationally, I would say, rule of law based or rule of fairness and justice based approach. Right now, it's completely a failure system, and then you put pushing more access. It's a big concern.
Mhm.
Actually, I was hearing from a negotiator few weeks back who was telling the reason cited is food security many a times because of climate change and etc. But 80% of the requirement for food security is already covered by the 64 crops. So, what is it that people are searching in this expansion is a question which one of the negotiator was asking. So, it's a very important question for us. And I think it is actually a kind of an approach towards a system or toward by a group of people who would like to undermine national ABS systems as well as Nagoya Protocol. Because
Mhm.
for them, it is about negotiating what you call bilaterally to every country is a tedious task, and they just don't want to carry on with it. And I was recently hearing from a scientist from India who was
Mhm.
telling how multilateral system proposals is actually um, uh, not even logical economically, because she was telling that if um, if you source ingredients for your work from, let's say, 3 countries or 4 countries, you have supposed even you're ideally or you're economically are supposed to share benefits to all the 4 countries
Mhm.
in the way they deal with you, right? Because each one of them is giving you unique ingredient, and they will definitely ask a unique benefit back, right?
Mhm.
And which is required for them, right? And you should be sharing it. That is an ideal economic situation where you transfer in an economic principle basis. Whereas currently the industry as well as researchers and some lobbies are arguing, no, sharing benefits with 4 countries is a difficult task, so we will put it into one multilateral system like FAO or UN or CBD or somewhere, and then some money. In fact, not even benefits. That's the more sad part of it. There, people are not talking about the non-monetary benefits. Just talking about the money of it. We'll put some donations, like 1%, 2% of our commercial profit to a fund, and then these countries can compete to get these money from the central fund with project applications, etc.
Mhm.
How irrational is that kind of approach, right? You source it from the 4 countries, and you're ideally supposed to give it to 4 different countries,
Mhm. But
and you
that's
don't want to
difficult.
give. Yeah, and then you just and that's difficult, and then and then you give it to some money, that to a donation, very simple, feeble money, 1% or less than 1% to a fund, and let those countries compete for it. So this
Mhm.
is a very reversal of the system of CBD and Nagoya Protocol, and there are a lot
Mhm.
of people who are willing to do it across fora, FAO, WHO, CBD. So this is a real threat which
Mhm.
developing countries are facing.
Okay.
And
So
yeah,
I would really like to know who actually came up with this idea that the Annex 1 should be expanded. Is there any specific country which came proposed
so
it?
I could see Switzerland has been proposing this from 2017 onwards. There's a fixed proposal, written proposal submitted to the GB 2017 onwards. You could see that.
Mhm. So at this moment, how many different point of views are there on this aspect? Like who supports it, who does not support it? Do we have any clarity on that?
So it's slightly a little bit personality driven as well, right? Like when the negotiators come from gene banks, or if the negotiators themselves has a background of biotechnology or science background, they automatically tend to see expansion as a good idea because it eases this what you call as the research process, right? You don't have to negotiate. So people kind of tend to like that idea,
Mhm.
but when they look at a little bit switched off their that hat and then just see it from a neutral perspective, from a perspective of fairness and justice, they all understand that this is a very bad deal, right? When a
Mhm.
system is not working, you are just expanding the annex without improving anything on the governance side. And also, issues like DSI, there is a complete objection from the developed countries not to even speak of DSI in the SMTA. So
Mhm.
as per CBD, you got a right, you got a complete right to determine what should happen with the DSI generated from your material and to put that conditions or clauses into the material transfer agreement. And here, the material transfer agreement is silent on it. So, these kind of things are there. So, um, yeah. So,
So
so Switzerland, yeah.
if this is agreed on, what are the implications for the global south, India, and actually other negotiations like the CBD and even international laws like the Biodiversity Act?
I think it is going. So I wouldn't. I really wish that this amendment of expanding Annex 1 be adopted in this GB,
Mm-hmm.
even if it is for a limited number of crops. There are for several reasons for this. Like if you want to amend a treaty, once you amend a treaty, then it takes some time for every country to ratify it and it come into force. So if you are amending a treaty, generally you should amend wherever it lacks. So definitely in the side of DSI, in the side of um, um, benefit sharing, it is lacking. So you
Mm-hmm.
should actually amend those parts as well. Currently, there is no such proposals in the table. It's
Mm-hmm.
only what you call amending the Annex 1 is on the table. So I wouldn't want it to be adopted at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
Be very frank and open at this stage. I mean, really calling out for a rejection of this expansion of Annex 1
Mm-hmm.
uh, with no doubt at this GB.
Okay.
And then what is its implications is that like it is going. So for example, when an international multilateral system like plant treaties ABS system is created, it is actually created for a specific purpose and for specified genetic resources.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how Nagoya Protocol says, like your countries have sovereign rights to deal it bilaterally, but if
Mm-hmm.
they want to create an international system, they are free to do it, but for specified genetic resources and for specific purposes. When they
Mm-hmm.
use this word specified genetic resources and specific purposes, etc., they were very clear because they didn't want it a complete hijack on the genetic resources by international community. So that's why they allowed for this kind of a mechanism. uh, the treaty, what is happening, as we just discussed, is not limiting it with a specialized purpose because you give it to the International Gene Bank, you have no information who is taking it. So
Mm-hmm.
several seed companies have got medical businesses. Several seed companies have got their own food processing businesses, and you are not getting benefit from any of these purposes, right? So there
Mm-hmm.
is no anti-diversion measures in the treaty. So it's
Mm-hmm.
a real challenge. Firstly, even within the specified purposes, like the food and agriculture, food and feed purposes are recognized under the SMTA, but the benefits are coming only from seed sales. Let's take the case of a potato. If someone is accessing a particular or several gene varieties of or genetic resources of potato and develops a particular variety of potato and do it exclusive farming on that, convert it into chips and sell it as chips. You don't have to share benefits, right?
Exactly.
Some a beer company
Mm-hmm.
access barley and develop a particular variety of barley, exclusively cultivate barley and then sell beer. They don't have to share benefits, right? So these things have to be closed. I mean, these gaps have to be closed. Otherwise, we putting all our genetic resources into the system is a real problem because it's not going to not only okay, it's not like we are giving it for FAO, fine, we give it like that. It's also affecting our national ABS systems other way around as well.
Mm-hmm.
Ayurvedic medicines, a lot of medicines coming out of food crops, and a lot of cosmetics have been prepared out of food crops. So
Mm-hmm.
these are all benefits which you would be ideally getting at the national level, but you will be missing it because the system or the MLS would be diverting these resources
Mm-hmm.
either in the form of DSI or the material as such.
So one good example of this would be turmeric. Turmeric is food, but it is medicinal. So according to Ayurveda, all food is medicine. So it is a big problem for India. So now if we shift to India, so what is India sharing? Do we have any idea about that? What have we given?
So until now, India has notified 9 crops out of 64 crops. Um, and some of these assertions, if you look at the notification India has given to the Secretariat, also talks about farmers' varieties.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not very sure, I mean, I'm not a person who clearly understands a lot of these languages and terminology. I understands the international legal aspects of ABS, but the technical aspects still needs to be supported by people who know this knowledge more. But some of my friends from the farmers community has clearly shown or has been telling me that these farmers varieties which has been notified, some of them are even registered varieties under the India's PVPFRA law. So that means there is a farmers organization or a farmers community who's actually the real original contributor of the seeds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And their consent is not taken in when this notification. Actually, the treaty says the farmer's consent has to be taken
Mm-hmm.
if it is cultivated in the in situ conditions or if it is developed by the farmers, right? You should take it from the farmers thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be a national problem. I mean, it's a maybe an understanding. It's also like a little bit difficult because it's how the systems evolve, especially in terms of ABS. There are a lot of confusions how the authorities evolve, like regulatory authorities evolve in this aspect. In areas, especially in various developing countries, have this kind of problems. But yes, the challenge here is these things have notified, and this has gone to international gene banks, and that's it. We don't know what outcome is coming out of it, right? What information are coming out of it. So and also if you want to see another interesting thing, I don't understand the difference. India's notification says 9 crops and 26,000 accessions, etc. If you go and see the map in the MLS infographic map, there are
Mm-hmm.
around 4 lakh or more than 4 lakh samples shared by India in the thing. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how that numbers are calculated, but yeah.
Okay, so this traditional variety aspect is very important because we did a study recently when we just studied around a handful, around a dozen of seed banks in India, community seed banks, and we found that they were holding as many as 800 special varieties which were climate resilient. So this there's obviously a lot of interest in these community seed banks now. Even FAO is promoting them now, so it's a lot of concern, and we are actually sitting on a lot of on a treasure basically. So the decision here is going to be of interest and concern.
It's some of these things needs to be actually addressed nationally. Like for example, how a community seed bank's accessions, how will it be whether it will become the part of multilateral systems
Mhm.
accession, notified accessions. Like just now what I said, right? Some farmers variety has been notified, but whether the farmer's consent has been taken. Similarly, it's a very clear confusion when we have a community seed bank. What happens, like, I have been looking at the proposals of some of the proposals in the FAO, the
Mhm.
treaty, they give capacity building. And in terms of capacity building, they also sometimes transfer in some good money to, buy some technology or buy some instruments like fridges or power generators, etc., to maintain the seed banks, etc. But uh, when they give that kind of assistance, one of the conditions they try to make is to ensure that these collections become part of the MLS or the multilateral system.
Mhm. That's
So this is a challenge, right? You come and you say, okay, you're supporting the community seed bank and other things,
Mhm.
sometimes nationally, sometimes internationally, etc. And then you take it, even if, to be frank, if you ask farmers, okay, farmers are also very, very uh, open in terms of sharing the seeds. So I cannot complain people are sharing seeds. What I'm trying to say is when you share the seeds, please have an order, please have a discipline, understand whom you are giving and what things are coming out of it, even if it is knowledge. Forget
Mhm.
about money, forget about the variety, new variety seeds, etc. But some good scientist or some good researcher across the world is sitting on your seed and developing some knowledge. It,
Mhm.
it is, for me, it is most precious, right? You get that knowledge back to what is capable out of our seeds,
Mhm.
right? So we have to ensure those knowledge and that information and that technology or benefits come back to us.
So India is also at the Indian government, Indian delegation is also at Peru right now, I presume. Do we understand what they're going to say there? Do we have any idea on this?
I think it's a very controversial topic to address. So, I've been observing the last 5 sessions of the working group, and official from India is the co-chair. Uh, and as a co-chair, he has maintained publicly in the working group meetings a very neutral position, not supporting either developed countries' views or developing countries' views, was very strictly kind of thing. Um, but on the other hand, we don't, I mean, India has not sent any other negotiator or any other observer to the working group meetings. It was only the co-chair in the working groups. So this is the first time India is going to address as India, like the other official was a co-chair as India, this to the package. And there was a consultation meeting with farmers and some of stakeholders. I also got a opportunity to participate in
Mhm.
that meeting. In that meeting, we had a presentation from the co-chair, where the co-chair has actually put up some arguments. Something like first argument was India will have still the ability to decide which of the crops can be shared internationally or through the multilateral system. And then there was an argument that India is number one of the people who access seeds from the multilateral system, like for research and development, etc. And India is also looking out for some of the accessions from some crops like tomato,
Mhm.
palm oil, and some other things I forgot uh, to for Indian researchers, etc. So for these reasons, perhaps expansion is a good idea. That was a presentation. It was a presentation made, and but most of the stakeholders, including farmers and ourselves, we actually said many of these arguments are not factually sustainable or legally sustainable, especially because the treaty does not allow any reservations. So
Mhm.
once you agree to your obligation, then you are supposed to be sharing all the things. Currently, it is 64 crops out
Mhm.
of all the national collections. Uh, and you have notified only 9. There is
Mhm.
already a compliance concern over there because there is a compliance committee report which
Mhm.
says countries who have notified all of their um, Annex 1 crops, the countries who have not declared not all of their, so India is on the partial list, right?
Mhm.
There was no pressure on the countries who was only partially notified to notify it fully because the system is not functioning well, as well as there is a strategic plan or strategic view in the developed countries to have the Annex 1 expanded to all crops. So
Mhm.
until then, you wouldn't get a lot of pressure from these US or Switzerland or Norway to put all of your crops into the system.
Mhm.
Once the annex is amended to all crops, their color will change, right? So this is a challenge. We don't think that India has ability, or not just India, like any country, any party has an ability to choose what can go into the multilateral system and what cannot go into multilateral. So that's a wrong
Mhm.
thing. And then the relationship uh, and the arguments that of course India has access a lot of seats and it's the number one country who access seats from the multilateral system. But then there is a natural question comes, right? Who from India is accessing them? Are public institutions accessing it? Indian seed companies are accessing it. Researchers individually are accessing it. Who is accessing it? So do we have information? I mean, as far as I understand, we are not supplied with any information.
Mhm.
And after this access, any improved varieties have come out. We have
Mhm.
been supplied with that information. So we need to know these aspect as well. And if you are looking for some 3 or 4 crops, which is not, you assume is not, is India does not do not have sufficient access to diversity, you still have the ability to reach out the countries who having diversity to bilaterally and get access as well. So multilateral system is not necessarily a So we are a bit concerned, civil society organizations and farmers organizations are concerned because this presentation gave us a hint that India might be considering to expand the
Mhm.
annex, right, to full of API. But I don't think it's a finalized position,
Mhm.
or it was a I would like to give that benefit of doubt that it was a presentation proposal for the stakeholder consultation to understand what stakeholders or rights holders, farmers are right holders,
Mhm.
think about these issues, and maybe the ministry is still
Mhm.
churning out what should be their final position in the GB.
So, what does the civil society want and farmers group? What do they want? What are
Uh,
their?
a lot of things actually. I think this GB civil society really wants to have a transformative effect on the functioning of the multilateral system.
Mhm.
Especially, I think we want to actually ask a report of certain things like implementation of these benefit sharing obligations, which was not there until now. Like, for
Mhm.
example, if you look at the reports of implementation and operations of the multilateral system, you will have implementation reports like how access have been promoted or how access has been working, and then you will have a report of how benefit sharing fund has been distributed, right? But how this access connected to this benefit sharing fund, how does this people who access this PGRFA shared any money to the benefit sharing fund, or how these people who are accessing this PGRFA reported back to the global information system the research outcomes of their research? There is
Mhm.
no report on that. So we would, I think, civil society would begin by asking for these reports.
Mhm.
Second, and essentially, it's a very important thing that the SMTA clearly says the SMTAs has to be reported to GB, which means all the users and their accessions they have made needs to be seen by the members of the governing body, which was never given to governing body all this while. That is why we are in darkness, right? That is why this is not being implemented properly. So we would definitely assert that these SMTAs be published,
Mhm.
right? Because previously Article 50, the CGIR centers used to publish their SMTAs. I don't know
Mhm.
for what reason Treaty Secretariat stopped that practice even from the CGIR centers. Whereas the treaty and the SMTA is very clear. This has to be reported information to the governing body. So we'll be asking for these reports.
Mhm.
Once these things come into play, or at least they agree to give this report, I think civil society will definitely say no to expansion of Annex 1, at least in this GB, because we will say we want to see how the system is improving in its governance and its functioning in the coming days. And if it is satisfying that there is a good governance of the system, then we
Mhm.
can think what crops needs to be added into the list. That
Mhm.
also, like, follow the treaty's understanding. The treaty's understanding is have a negotiated selection of crops, which is important for food security, and where countries are interdependent with each other for accessing that genetic diversity. So based on those criteria, you select crops if you want to add more crops into the Annex 1, but only after ensuring that system is functioning very well. And the third demand would be to ensure that the DSI from the PGRFA
Mhm.
shared through this multilateral system is also handled accountably, and the users of the sequence information also share benefits.
That's actually a lot of thing, and I hope we have support of the rest of the global south also in this. Is there any developed country supporting these kind of demands?
Uh, as far as I understand, the only positive thing developed countries are supporting is about some countries supporting the issues associated with patenting or IPRs associated with the system. So there is a provision in the treaty which says when you put material into the multilateral system and somebody uses those materials, the recipients are not supposed to take IPRs, including any other things like plant variety protection rights, etc., in a manner the access to the original materials in the multilateral system will be curtailed, or will be compromised, or will be undermined. So recently, what we are observing is that there are a lot of patterns and things coming up on sequence information from these materials.
Mhm.
So this is a challenge for continued access to the multilateral system. So in that element, some of the developed countries are willing to kind of intervene and say, yeah, we need to do something about it, ensure that the access to the multilateral system is not restricted through IPRs or PVP protections, etc. That's one thing. Also, maybe to speak about the CGIR centers, I mean, I've been criticizing some of their activities. I should also say that they were considerate of our demand for the transparency. So they were agreeing to the idea that SMTAs needs to be published, or the information regarding the users and the accessions of their seats needs to be shared with the governing body. So that was, I mean, that's also a little bit concerning, I mean, consoling for us from their activity. Yeah.
Okay. So we have got some comments and questions, though I think you have already answered them, but I would go through them once again if wherever possible, a couple of them, because we have a few minutes left. So Asani is asking what is the level of implementation of the Nagoya Protocol. Now, this is not related, but I suppose it adds on to our understanding.
So, um, you know, people think about access and benefit sharing in Nagoya Protocol implementation uh, in a very fanciful way, because for example, when you come to the multilateral system, they talk about like fund. I mean, 1% of the entire seed industry coming, etc. Right? So huge
Mhm.
amount in a way to think about it, but does not come. That's also another interesting aspect. But when you compare it to Nagoya Protocol, I would say many countries are doing very well. In fact, you might have observed recently India's National Biodiversity Authority
Mhm.
uh, has come out with a notification press release that around 44 lakhs or something, I forgot the number exactly, of pattern linked monetary benefits are shared to the shared back to even the communities, biodiversity uh, management communities, etc. Like, so
Mhm.
giving the diverse parts of the and also indigenous communities, etc. So in a way, these are functioning, and there are a lot of scope for improvement. For example, India's national ABS laws, I think, has to be a little bit more focused on non-monetary benefit sharing as well, like medicines or technology or knowledge. It's more monetary focused, I would say.
Mhm.
Whereas if you go and see South African national ABS laws, very significant improvements in terms of, where they have a separate model, unlike India's model, where the national authority just becomes a mediator, not even a mediator, just provides a platform for the negotiation between provider and the recipient. So the communities directly enter into the negotiations with, and it also has flaws because sometimes some of these communities don't have adequate legal capacity to negotiate contracts, etc. But still, they have been managing to get benefits such as technology transfer, as well as they have developed a complete research center itself for reviews. So some people building getting funds for universities.
Mhm.
In that ways, they're also acting. But one thing which I really want to specify here is, many a times people measure Nagoya Protocol's implementation success in terms of number of benefits. Even here, even in ITPGRFA, if you see, the entire discussion is about why only 6 users have shared benefits, monetary benefits, why not more money is not coming. User-based income, that's what they call about it. Their focus is on the user-based income. But the CBD, the provision of the objective of the CBD and Nagoya Protocol is very, very clear. Appropriate access, taking into account on the all rights on those resources. Which means if I am the owner of the resource, or if I am the community which is nurturing this resource, my consent and my rights needs to be respected. Only then there is no biopiracy.
Mhm.
So that is the major element of Nagoya Protocol and CBD to avoid biopiracy, right? So I think that from that aspect we should see like whether the people who are accessing the seeds or accessing the genetic resources are coming to the country of origin. Are they coming to the what you call as community where it is developed and on and interacting with them and getting permissions and sharing benefits with them. This is an important aspect to be looked into. Like if you look at India's process, if a foreigner applies to National ABS Authority, it travel that application actually goes back to the local uh, biodiversity management committee to give approval and then go back upwards and then gets so some scientists would feel this is a lot of red tape, right? Because you give it to apply in Chennai and then go to Kerala state, Trivandrum, and from there it goes to Wayanad and then it goes to a community. But on the other hand, it's something coming from them. You have to respect their rights, right? I mean, this is important.
Hmm. Yes, that's one of the foremost thing to keep in mind. We have another question from Deepak Kumar who is asking, is India receiving fair benefit sharing for its contribution to global gene banks? You have answered it multiple times, but in one line or two, if you can once again
Yeah,
reiterate.
so India is accessing a lot of gene materials from global gene banks. That way, India is getting some benefits. But in terms of monetary benefits, non-monetary benefits, out of the use of those uh, materials which we have shared, we don't have enough data.
Mhm. Okay, so this has been a very interesting discussion, and I hope for everyone some of the concepts have been clearer, are now clearer. So I would like to thank you, Nitin, and also thank everyone
Yeah,
else
I
for
just
joining us. Yes,
because I see a chat from Jagannathan Vishwanathan, which says commercialization of agriculture has cost a lot of traditional cereal varieties, and we have lost gene bank of above varieties forever. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to highlight because I heard some developing country negotiators making this kind
Mm-hmm.
of a remark. So I just wanted to share it with the group that many of them are saying because of this system or because of this international gene bank system, etc., like ERI and CGIR centers, they develop improved varieties and then they release it through national authorities to some of the governments to improve food security or whatever it is. There are policy debates. I mean, it may be contested issue as well. But many of the negotiators have said this has promoted what you call as monoculture or
Monocropping.
doing monocropping,
Yeah.
right? And the farmers have lost gene diversity which they already used to have because they're just following this monocrops which is yielding more and giving thing. And now they are becoming more and more dependent on these gene banks releasing varieties and giving back to them, whereas previously they were independent and able to manage it by themselves. It has, I mean, it will have definitely both sides of views, but this has been recorded. People are telling it, and people are telling the treaty is focusing more on XI2 conservation and laboratory aspects, not talking inside to conditions of cropping and farmers' rights who work till and toil on the soil, right? That focus should be more on the farmers and the farming land and the
Mm-hmm.
inside to cultivation rather than on the uh, XI2 conservation and laboratory based technologies, etc. So it's a big debate, it's a huge thematic debate
I, yeah,
in
I
the
did not
treaty.
realize that question was very important. So thank you for taking it up. But it's a very interesting aspect. And specifically, when we are working on lots of traditional varieties, we see that how they are being kicked out of the field in a way by commercial crops. So it is a big concern. So thanks once again, everyone. And we will be following the discussions at Peru, and you will be able to see updates on this on the Down to Earth site. And we will be back soon with another biodiversity confab where we would try to explain other complex issues as we are calling them. Thank you. Thank you,